Hi, everybody. Welcome to Get Mental Podcast. Thank you for being here today. As always, I hope you guys are having a good week. A lot of people are feeling a lot more positive and hopeful because of the results of our 2020 election. And I know that some people, at least almost the other half of our country, is feeling not so hopeful and not so great, like I've said before. So I'm still on this thing where I'm thinking about the psychological effects of all the different processes that have occurred, or I've observed anyway, to have occurred for us psychologically as human beings. So it got me down to thinking about winning and losing, and why as human beings we tend to favor winning over losing. And I thought, well, there are obvious reasons for that, but what really are the deeper reasons for that? Why are we obsessed with it? And we've built a whole culture around winning, especially in the United States, but it's not unique to us, right? Just look at our sports, and we start with this thing at a very early age. So I just really started to think about that. Last time it was hope that I was pondering on, and this week it's why we hate losing and why we love winning, and why certain people are drawn to cheat or do anything and everything that they can to win. So here are some of the things that I found out, okay? First of all, my specific personal thoughts about winning is, it makes us feel powerful. It establishes a certain level of dominance. It establishes a certain level of superiority, and I think it's biologically rewarding, meaning it makes us feel good, okay? But you're going to be surprised what the research tells me about why losing is even worse because of what it does to our bodies. It was fascinating. So, is winning ultimately about power? And is losing, if that is the hypothesis here, is losing then ultimately about vulnerability and disempowerment? A lot of you might say yes, okay? But bear with me, because this is kind of a bigger, deeper, there are a lot of deeper layers around this subject, and it's bigger than what it seems on the outside. So I have a bunch of notes here, so pardon me, okay? I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So winning, let's start with that. First of all, winning increases our testosterone, which in turn increases our dopamine levels, which in effect gives us a sense of high, similar to, the high you would get if you were addicted to something and you took the substance, or you're addicted to a person or a food and you had your fix, so to speak. That's how powerful winning is. There's literally a cellular effect, and it lights up the reward centers of our brain, and it gives us this peak performance, the satisfaction, the high from a peak performance. And I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who's not going for some kind of peak performance, or peak experience, sorry. So it makes sense, right? Why we're drawn to it, why we prefer it over losing. But here's the interesting thing. Did you know that losing actually is harder on our bodies? Like, we feel it more powerfully and more intensely than winning? I'm going to share with you a study here. In 2011, a study tracked eye movement and heart rate and discovered that people become far more active and physically impacted in response to losing than winning. And another thing is that other studies have found that the what's called electrodermal response, that is what's the electrical characteristics in the skin, goes far more haywire when we lose versus when we win. So there's a direct evidence here of what's literally happening to our body, all the way from our skin and possibly, down to our cells, I would argue, where it's just something that happens. It's not something we're doing. It's just an automatic response. It's almost like it's built in to our nature. Okay, so if you want to learn more about this, you could go to an article, bustle.com. I'm sure there are a lot of other different sources too, but this is just kind of an overview. So that's how powerful it is for us to win, and that's how powerful, negatively powerful, for us to lose. Another thing I want to share is, according to psychology professor Ian Robertson of Trinity College in Dublin, he says that all species have hierarchies. So you can kind of relate to that, like just look at, animals and look at people. We tend to still, respond to hierarchy and chain of command and authority and so forth. So our position, according to Dr. Robertson, our position in that hierarchy will determine our health, our mental function, and our mood. So it's important that we end up winning or being good enough somehow, because we are wired to think and believe, right? From kind of this, the way our brains have evolved, that our health, our mental function, and our mood, and I dare to say our survival, is dependent upon where we are in the hierarchy. And the higher we are in the hierarchy means we are safer, healthier, and happier. So perhaps on an unconscious level, that's what drives us to win. Because the higher we are on the hierarchy, okay, I'm going to repeat it, the more happy, healthy, stable, and safe we feel. So imagine being number one on that hierarchy, which is kind of the ultimate, goal of winning, right? It gives you that sense, and I would argue a false sense of safety and stability, okay? Because we don't have those kind of threats anymore. Our threats are largely psychological now. We're not literally trying to keep, ourselves alive because we're going to be eaten by a lion, right? But to me, what's fascinating is that how automatic these responses are. So it behooves me to think that it's not just a psychological state, but it's largely a biological process. The good news is, I'm always about the good news, is we actually can still practice how to be better losers, and that we can go against our very biology and our lizard brain, as we call it, which is really the oldest part of our brain that is concerned with survival. We could retrain our minds, our brain, and our bodies so that we can have a more healthy attitude to losing. And we're seeing that a lot in a lot of organized sports. People are not killing each other because they lost, right? There are a lot of people who have been able to model to us healthy ways of losing. And so it got me thinking, well, what are the qualities, or what helps with that? What helps you become a better loser? A healthy, kind of graceful response? What helps people, cultivate that? So I'm going to enumerate some of the things that I believe contributes to being able to learn to deal with the loss in a healthy way. So first of all, we need to learn to differentiate between healthy and unhealthy competition. So healthy competition, generally speaking, is when, you're in organized sports or even politics, or something where there's a system of evaluation, there's a system in which results are tallied, and there's a consensus of what winning looks like and what the rules of engagement are. Okay, unhealthy competition is really, generally speaking, again, it's when you are constantly comparing yourself to others, constantly competing against others, when really it's your insecurity, it's your feeling of inadequacy, it's driven by other unconscious or conscious motivations to one up somebody, okay? And there's a lot of reasons why you might do that. In my experience, that's usually largely rooted in earlier childhood experiences and your conditioning, and often trauma as well. So if that's something you're struggling with, that and chronically, struggling with, that's the time to seek the help of a therapist, okay? So it's unhealthy, okay? Here are some guidelines. Unhealthy for you if your identity is predominantly organized by what you do and how much you win. Okay, so if your identity is predominantly organized by what you do and by how much you win, okay, then losing for you, if you're in this category, becomes a reflection of your personal worth and value as a person. It then becomes really hard to look at losing as an objective, outcome that occurred because of all of these external factors, okay? So it's hard for you to not see it as a personal failure. Have you ever heard athletes talk? I love it when they talk about, they talk to athletes who have lost and what athletes have to say. And a lot of times the people who really, I feel, exhibit a healthy state of mind around losing are the ones who are able to verbalize some of the initial impressions and analysis that they have on why he or she lost or why their team lost, right? When they're describing characteristics of the play, of the team, of where they might have fallen short, and they're able to talk objectively about where the winning team or the winning person may have had an advantage. That's what we're going for. That's healthy losing, right? You have an objectivity about it. You're not internalizing it and turning it into untrue statements about yourself. And it is not a direct reflection of your personal worth or value as a human being. Okay? You can take it as feedback, not as failure. Okay? And again, in my experience, when it's hard to do that, usually there are a lot of what we call negative core beliefs that are associated with that. And those are things that a skilled therapist can help you unpack and most of the time really resolve, or at least get you to a much healthier place with. Okay? So please, don't underestimate the life-changing power of good therapy. So the other way to kind of differentiate whether you're on an unhealthy track as far as losing and winning is if your sense of safety is dependent upon whether you win or not. Okay? So I'm not talking about, war or death situations. That's a lot more complicated subject, and I can see why we'd want to win in those circumstances, right? Because we really are talking about our national safety and security, sometimes, not all the time, but that's a different conversation. What I'm talking about here is when you falsely think that your sense of safety, right, is dependent upon you winning. So why I say falsely is because a lot of times you really are safe even if you lose. You might feel psychologically shitty and disempowered, but you're safe. There is no real threat or danger other than the one we've imagined in our minds. And again, self-compassion, right? Hopefully you're realizing the reason why that's hard is because of all the physiological processes that are going on when we lose, as I had described earlier on in this talk. The next thing that you can look at is reflect upon is, do you try to win at all costs? Do you lie, cheat, manipulate, ultimately only thinking about yourself versus what's in the best interest of the group? Okay? Do you try to win at all costs? If the answer is yes, and you are willing to lie, cheat, manipulate, and just think about your own self-interest and self-preservation, then that is definitely unhealthy, very damaging, not just for others, but to you, unbeknownst to you perhaps. And there is a better way, okay? There's a better way to fill your cup, to to feel good or better about yourself, to get your needs met for significance. There's a better way to get your needs met for significance. And, seek the help of a therapist, because if you're in that kind of pattern, that's really, that it will take some time to unstick that, but it is doable if you're willing to put in the time and the work and the resources, okay? So the last thing I want to talk about as far as like the checklist here is you get into a toxic shame spiral and internalize loss as a personal failure. So very similar to my first point, right? So shame is a big piece that we often feel when we're not aware enough, when we are not in a healthy state of mind, when we lose, okay? Because shame is basically the message that there's something inherently wrong with me. It becomes really, really personal. And there's something inherently wrong with me. And there's something defective about me. And again, those are usually rooted in core beliefs, which are usually rooted in earlier childhood experiences of pain, abuse, neglect, trauma. So something to really think about. If there's often a lot of shame, it's not going to be something you're just going to be affirm your way out of, meaning it's not something you're just going to be able to, give yourself 2 or 3 affirmations and you're going to be out of the shame spiral. No, this stuff is really deep and really kind of internally complex. So that's where you would need the support and the guidance of a skilled therapist, okay? There's a difference between saying I lost versus I'm a loser. There's a difference, a massive difference between saying I failed versus I'm a failure. So to be able to say I lost or my team lost is a healthy approach to losing versus saying I'm a loser, I'm a failure. That's when you've started to internalize. That's when you've started to turn that event into untrue statements about yourself, okay? So it might take a little bit of therapy to really discern between those 2 ways of being. I lost versus I'm a loser. I failed versus I'm a failure, okay? The difference there is I lost is a factual statement. It's an objective statement. It's not a reflection of you, your personhood. I'm a loser is a direct reflection of your worth, your value, your personhood, and that's what we don't want to happen every time we don't get our way. That's what we don't want to happen every time we lose, okay? Those are untrue statements. So, again, if this is something you're struggling with, please really consider the help of a therapist. The last thing I want to talk about is what's called negativity bias. Some of you may have heard that before, but basically negativity bias is, our tendency as human beings to focus on what's wrong, because the negative thoughts and experiences actually affect us more powerfully than positive experiences and neutral experiences. Okay? Do you follow me? So there's a reason we're so drawn to negativity. It actually has a more powerful effect on our minds and our bodies than when we are observing something positive or something neutral, okay? So to break this down even more, when we win, like I said earlier on, there's an increased high in our bodies. There's a chemical response when we win, right? Dopamine and the brain get lit up. But what's fascinating to me is that losing has a more effect on our bodies and brains. And can you believe that? I can't hear, but winning, the smiles, they feel so, according to science, and really feels powerfully. And so we feel bad, feeling bad, then we feel good. We feel bad, then we, that's, yeah, I know, but why it's so next time and lose everything that you're embarking on or you're trying to make in your life, right? Even like in a relationship, can't get right kind of thing. Self-compassion. It's hard to slow down. This is why you picked. Okay, that that's not an excuse to not practice healthier self, not getting what you want as motivation. Okay, so again, these processes, it's not your fault. Something you're doing or not doing. Automatic response to lose. Our lizard brain is, oh God, we could literally die. But once you're able to go, okay, that's just what my body is having. We should do objectively separate loss, okay, loss of going for, loss of game, so maybe if you're sorry for a certain reason, yes, it's a lot more powerful. Okay. Know that once you slow down and you value that, you can shift to analyzing ways you and how can you shift this to our health and the way that, okay, outside of to do that is to be able to say this project as I wanted them to work out is not the ultimate measure of my worth value. Okay? Those and goals is the ultimate measure of my worth and value. You practice that. You may not only be a better loser, you're taking more risks and and not let your debilitate you from continuing whatever it is you're trying to attain. When you stand that it has nothing to do with your value, it frees your pursuit. It's just about the pursuit. It doesn't become about your significance. Okay. Hopefully, this was on the psychology and why we are so drawn to this. And insight and tools to navigate certain failures in your life from different perspectives. And I don't know, now you could totally, we could have seen and apply it now. Somebody who's going to lose a reality of this. And hopefully this information will also give empathy, some empathy for the other party who's having okay. And there's this physiological that has to be processed before some of the loss finish. And that will depend on people's things. But I just wanted to, in a way, losing and hopefully apply it to your own life. Hopefully able to inspire you to be more to, embrace your loved ones who may have to and political losses. Okay? So as always, thanks for listening. Be well, be gentle, get mental, because we all have this. And by the way, talk next week. I'm very happy to talk about cannabis, and we're going to in the time that we have you guys